want to start by thanking the South Metro Chamber for hosting us. Thank you, Aaron, for moderating, and thank you, Congressman Coffman, both for joining us and for your service. My top priority is to get this economy moving again. I believe you do that not by concentrating all the benefits at the top, but by growing the middle class. And the way to do that, one of the best ways to do that, in my view, is to make higher education more affordable. I've talked to middle-class families all across the 6th Congressional District who are struggling under a mountain of student loan debt.
Well, I believe in a step-by-step approach to immigration reform.
The Congressman suggested that a step-by-step approach would be appropriate. That'd be fine if Congress were actually willing to take a single step. But the trouble is this. The trouble is this. It has been more than a year now since the Senate passed, with bipartisan support, comprehensive immigration reform. You don't hear that phrase very often in Washington. Bipartisan support. 68 members of the U.S. Senate, Democrats and Republicans alike, stood together and said yes.
Women's reproductive rights in health care.
I'm pro-life. You know, I believe that, and I'm just pro-life. And I'm proud of that. And I do not support personhood, but I support a woman's access to certainly to this Hobby Lobby decision to get birth control.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'm almost 60.
I don't support the Hobby Lobby decision. I don't support it. I never supported the Personhood Amendment. And I believe a woman's right to choose should be protected. And a woman's right... I want to be clear, this is a profoundly personal decision. It is in some ways a profoundly moral decision. And that's one of the reasons I believe it should be an individual decision. I don't want the government, and I don't want an employer telling a woman how to make her own health care decisions. So, look, I think the big problem is economic mobility's absence right now. What we ought to be doing is everything we possibly can to help folks who are willing to work hard and play by the rules get ahead so they can enjoy a higher standard of living, and just as important, so their kids can too. That's what drives most of us to do everything we do.
I was really talking to one of our business owners here in a Fortune 500 firm in Colorado, and telling me that you know, well, we're going to buy a plant in Japan. We don't really want to with our profits that we earned in Japan. But in the U.S. tax code, if you try and repatriate the money, then you pay taxes in the host country, then you pay taxes again.
I agree with the Congressman's suggestion for tax reform. Unfortunately, in this case, the Congressman's record doesn't match his rhetoric. He has voted repeatedly to protect tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas. That's a mistake. I met yesterday with a group of about 20 small business leaders. None of them in Fortune 500 companies, but all of them forced at times to compete with bigger corporations. And they feel like the playing field isn't level. They don't have time, they told me, to hire an army of lobbyists or to make lavish campaign contributions or to prowl the corridors of the U.S. Capitol to make their voice heard. And they shouldn't have to. They deserve a congressman who is committed to supporting them. I respect Congressman Coffman's position on this issue. We just happen to disagree when it comes to the votes we would cast. I would end tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas. He has voted instead to protect them.
Hey.
Mike, please.
What was the question again?
Well, I think Andrew.
And I look forward to seeing those votes wherever they are.
In the meantime, what we ought to do, the most popular proposal I've heard, would require candidates for office to wear the decals of their corporate sponsors on their clothing, like NASCAR drivers do. I don't want you to get me wrong here. As I said at the outset, I am a strong proponent of a free market system. And I will do everything I can to work with the Chamber and other business groups and small businesses around the state to grow our economy, to promote entrepreneurship. I just don't happen to believe that congressional seats should be bought and sold to the highest bidder. And that's what we've allowed to happen under both parties. I want to demonstrate leadership on this issue. Join me right now on this stage in turning down contributions from special interest groups, in refunding the money that you've taken. In fact, I'll see your point and raise you. We'll turn down together all the money that's come in from any special interest group, any lobbyist, any outside organization. If, to the best of our ability, we could lead. We could make national news right now. Will you join me in that effort?
Well, I think everybody in here is a special interest person of some kind.
I also believe we ought to do everything we can to accelerate our transition to a clean energy economy in sun, in wind, in biomass, and geothermal energy sources. I recognize we're not going to get there overnight, but we're never going to get there if we don't recognize the problem to be solved here, not just the threats to our environment, but the real opportunity we've got in Colorado and around the country to be a leader in creating thousands of good middle-class jobs right here in this state in renewable energy. I'm proud of the work we did in the State House on that front, and I'll bring the same commitment to Congress.
Well, I've voted for budgets, a 10-year forecast that bring us into a balanced budget. And there are tough decisions, but they are really modest changes that over the long run will make a very significant difference and change the trajectory of spending and debt that is killing this country.
You asked, how do you balance the budget? And you're right to start by tackling spending. Here's what I believe we ought to do. First, we ought to take a hard look at what the Government Accountability Office has already identified as hundreds of redundant programs. Some estimates suggest that eliminating those programs could save about $100 billion, or at least tens of billions of dollars. Second, the best way to balance the budget, of course, is to grow the economy. If more people are back at work, they're earning more income. We ought to give the Department of Health and Human Services the power to negotiate deeper discounts from the pharmaceutical industry. That step alone, by some estimates, could save about $156 billion over the next 10 years. We ought to be willing to tackle a fraud in the Medicare system so that folks are not putting in and the government isn't paying for false claims. Most estimates suggest that reforming our broken immigration system would also generate a great deal of revenue. By some estimates, about $900 billion over the next 20 years. That would go a long way towards balancing our budget. There's one other thing I'll say real quick. I'm willing to bet everybody in this room pays the taxes they owe. But a lot of folks outside this room don't. And if we were able to crack down on tax evasion from folks, individuals, and corporations who aren't paying what they owe under their legal obligations, under existing law, the estimates suggest $400 to $500 billion per year go uncollected in existing legal tax obligations. That's almost the size of the annual deficit. But I can guarantee you this. If we elect the same crowd that is running Congress today, nothing is going to change. And that is just unacceptable to me, not just as a candidate for office, but as an American, too.